So that's where we are at the federal level. Now, here at the state level, there are some things going on as well. And this bill that comes up perennially, a bill to give driver's licenses to illegal aliens, has again been introduced on Beacon Hill. And it's called the Safe Driving Bill. And this bill has nothing to do with safe driving or public safety. Its sole purpose is to give driver's licenses to illegal aliens. And so there's a hearing on Wednesday, and we're asking every Tea Party group in eastern Massachusetts if they could send a couple of people to testify on Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. 11 to 2 is when the hearing is scheduled. I am concerned that the hearing, well, not concerned, I'm hoping that the hearing is going to be postponed, as it has been once already, because we're supposed to get at least 8 inches of snow on Wednesday, or Tuesday night into Wednesday.
Is that disincentive or incentive for them to hold the hearing? You know?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'd rather the whole thing just be sent off for further study, but
that's tabling it, and somebody wants it. So Holly Robichaud had a good column on it. She mentioned your name in the Herald today.
Yes, Holly Robichaud. Yeah, if you need background on it, check today's Herald. Holly Robichaud. I've also brought some talking points if people are interested in not only attending the hearing to testify, because we know that the supporters of this bill, which include all of the illegal alien advocacy groups and ACLU type groups in Boston and eastern Massachusetts, will have lots of people coming to testify. They're having a press conference immediately before the hearing at 10:30. We're encouraging, and I specifically would like to know if any of you folks know people who have been directly affected by our government's failure to enforce immigration laws. Either I've been in touch with some folks who have lost family members to illegal alien drunk drivers, for example, or who lost jobs, worked at a company that fired people in order to hire illegal aliens, that kind of thing. We would like to get those stories out, because the Open Borders advocacy groups are specialists at sob stories, and they have very willing news media to write them up. And so we think not only the House Republican leadership, but also our lawmakers on Beacon Hill need to start hearing the stories of Americans and legal immigrants who are disadvantaged by our policies or our failure to enforce laws. So I'd really like to help collect those stories and get them to people who would like to see them, and get people like that to testify. So we're asking people in Massachusetts, if you can, testify on Wednesday. If you can't, then contact your legislator and let him or her know how you feel about the bill. And again, I brought some talking points about the so-called safe driving bill. If you hear it discussed on talk radio programs that you listen to, keep the buzz going. I personally believe, and what I'm hearing from folks, is that the Democrats really don't want to vote on this bill.
Thank you.
Because it's an election year, but they are introducing it as a way of keeping the support of all of the groups that do a lot of grassroots work for them come election time. So they can say, oh, well, we tried again to pass the bill, but they really don't want to vote on it. But we need to make sure, I don't trust them not to vote on it. If they don't hear any public backlash about the bill, they think it's fine because it's passed in California and Maryland and Connecticut and Vermont. And so...
How much of the incentive for this bill is to fraudulently flood the polls?
That's a real possible result because of motor voting. And it's not just flooding the polls. The problem with... I have done a bit of research on this. Yeah, the driver's license is the key to the kingdom. Yeah, you can get a job with a driver's license. You can get to your job more easily with a driver's license. It's accepted as ID to apply for social services.
Get on an airplane.
Get on an airplane, get in a federal building.
Don't we want immigrants to get on an airplane?
Everything. It's, you know,
Not with explosives.
it shuts down questioning about your legal status, basically. And as far as voting goes, I don't think that most illegal aliens actually risk voting. It does happen.
Depends upon whether they're organized or not.
It is a felony if it's prosecuted. What happens, what I believe the bigger danger is that when non-citizens show up on the voter registration lists, then people know that they're not likely to actually go to the polls, and so anybody looking to stuff the ballot boxes sends in ballots with those names, knowing full well that those people are never going to show up to vote. And that, in fact, has happened out in Springfield. There, in this case, it was a Republican candidate who did it, who stuffed the ballot box with ballots for him. No, and they were many of the names were illegal aliens' names who had been registered through false identification. So it really can corrupt our elections process. And our Secretary of State has shown no interest in investigating voter fraud or reports even of fraudulent voting, especially if the allegations involve non-citizens.
Well, in that case, wasn't the fraud on the part of the people who submitted those names, not the actual names who were listed?
Yes,
Even
but
though it was a Republican.
right.
Right. I'm not making partisan distinctions
it's bad no matter
here.
who does it.
Right. I'm
but
just saying that
they have the opportunity when there are all these names on there that people know are not. Because most, really, I mean, there are some illegal aliens who vote, but it's really not a lot of them.
Right.
Because they know they can't vote. And they don't want to be caught in the act because they can have their, if they want to become a citizen, if they ever want to naturalize, they can't do it if they have a federal felony like that on the record. I mean, they can, the consequences, if they were ever enforced, would be very serious. I think the greater danger is the use of the names by people who want to manipulate the process.
Right.
So it's bad. It's subverting democracy no matter which way
absolutely. But it's the guilt lies with the people who commit the fraud, not with the people whose names exist.
Correct. Correct. But why would we want to make it easier for people to do that?
Question. So, in the course of your talk, you've made it clear that not only are you opposed to illegal immigration, you're also opposed to many forms of legal immigration. And as an argument for this, you've given that because legal immigrants take away jobs from Americans. Now, that argument...
And legal immigrants.
Yeah, and legal immigrants take away jobs from Americans. Now, that argument is basically the argument we hear all the time from the Democrats. It's the zero-sum argument. You know, why we got to redistribute wealth, because if a rich guy has $1, he's taken that away from a poor guy. And we in the Tea Party are very eloquent at refuting that argument in the context of redistribution. Mm-hmm. Now, how is this argument, which we've already refuted, somehow correct in the context of immigration?
That's a good question.
Unless it's because they're immigrants and the other people are Americans, which would be a very offensive conclusion.
I was actually going to ask something like that.
The other element that's not being entered into it, and the fact that we're not beginning to create jobs, that we're punished to now because of 1,600 hours or whatever, the laws that are made, the restrictions that make it very difficult for somebody to start up a company.
Right.
No?
I think the point he was making, if I may, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I'd love to
I'm sure you got it.
And I'd love to hear your feedback on it, is that just as there's not a static amount of wealth and that we can create more wealth, there's not a static number of jobs.
Right.
And the fewer restrictions there are to starting a business and to employing as he who starts a business sees fit, the more wealth is created in the long run. Is that something along the lines of what you were saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that's what the question I wanted to ask, and you kind of already asked it for me, is there a static number of jobs, and if not, then why would that be a problem?
Isn't it a simple fact that there are sectors of the economy that are elastic and there are none sectors that are inelastic? If Mark Zuckerberg imports 10,000 Japanese coders, setting aside issues of assimilation and cultural issues, ultimately it may create a larger Silicon Valley. But there are only so many heads of lettuce. There's only so much low-skilled work to be done. That's a fairly inelastic part of the economy.
Well,
unless the population is going to grow, or we are going to undersell third world countries in agriculture by having the prices of labor down so far that we export the produce.
What's wrong with
It
that?
seems, well, fine. We can grow produce and we can sell it, and the labor that picks it could have a standard of living that they have in Mexico or Chile or places that now undersell us. And if they can do that,
to make money, they make more money here than they would in their home country.
there's only so many places you could sell a head of lettuce or a bunch of grapes if they get paid over $10 an hour. And there are many, many more places you could sell it if they make $5 a week. And that's a simple fact. There are parts of the economy that are not quite so elastic.
But getting back to my point, every one of these people that come to plant lettuce,
Yeah.
They are individually better off.
then they not only are they individually better off, but then they go to Walmart and buy all the things that they need. They go to the grocery store to buy the things that they eat. So the idea that they're somehow taking jobs away is not correct. They are in fact creating more jobs because of their own needs.
And I think that's what part of what, I agree with that. If they're becoming part of the economic activity, then yes.
There's only so many jobs available at certain sectors of the economy because land is finite and stomachs are finite. If you divide that labor, okay, at twice or three times the amount, you're going to have to subdivide the individual incomes of those people, and they're not going to be able to buy any more from Walmart
I don't think we're caring
than a native-born workforce that works at a higher wage. If you have two foreigners working for $5 an hour and they replace one native-born person working at $10 an hour, those foreign-born are going to only be able to spend the same amount of money as a native at Walmart. Not to mention the fact that they will probably avail themselves of many, many social services paid for by the taxpayer. I mean, it seems to me it's quite simple. There are parts
that we need to.
There are parts of the economy that are inelastic. There are parts that have the potential to grow because you're actually adding productive talent.
And who's better at figuring out which are the parts that have potential to grow and which aren't? Some bureaucrat in Washington setting immigration quotas, or all the people?
We assume that it is not a bureaucrat. The problem right now is that it is not a bureaucrat. That it may be a bureaucrat that is sending that quota. No, the nation as a whole ought to agree how many people they are going to admit in any given year.
But how does the nation know better than the market what the right number is?
Well,
Okay.
I want to say one thing, first of all, is that I'm not opposed to legal immigration.
Yeah.
To me, it's just that the amount and types of legal immigration that we're getting now are not improving our economy or meeting any economic needs or making Americans better off. It's not in our national interest. And I also, so that's one thing I just want to make clear, that there are lots of negative effects of illegal immigration especially, but that's not a reason for hostility to immigrants either. That, people come here, they're making rational decisions to come here because they think they are going to be better off. The problem is that we're a modern industrial economy. We don't need more unskilled labor. That the economic benefits that have been attributed to our immigration policy have to do with making our economy bigger, and that does not necessarily increase the well-being
Per capita.
people, exactly,
Well,
per capita. That just having more people and more people working here is not making people better off, and that we are in effect subsidizing certain kinds of employers by allowing the influx of more cheap labor than is really necessary. We're subsidizing the growers and the Hyatts of the world and the Mark Zuckerbergs of the country by allowing this, them to become dependent on a flow of cheap labor, and through that we're stifling innovation that might enable them to be productive and profitable without being dependent on cheap labor. And one example is agriculture. Because of the constant supply of illegal workers, growers do not look at mechanizing, for example. It was only, if you look at the sugarcane industry, for one, in Florida.
Well, if it was more...
Well, the problem with the sugarcane industry is maybe the trade-off would
I think the fact that we're
be...
attracting those workers means that there is a market for them.
If you've got a worker willing to work for $5 an hour, and it would cost you $6 an hour to run a machine to do that, and you go with the machine because you have a law that says the worker can't come here, that's waste. That's lost production to the economy.
Well, there is also this trade-off, and the sugarcane is an apropos thing. If there were not sugar quotas, then probably that inexpensive labor would stay in the Caribbean, and outside agricultural producers would undersell the domestic ones.
Unless you build a machine to do it cheaper and enrich machine.
The same interests that want unrestricted immigration for large labor supply also want to have their markets protected.
I think we can all agree that illegal immigration should be more difficult and legal immigration should be easier.
And there's issues with it because there's a social safety net that it will take advantage of, and we should really go towards free markets and a free economy.
The problem is the welfare state.
Right. It truly is.
And we're talking about people, not factors of production necessarily.